Welcome to Vineyard Boise. It's our vision to make the invisible God visible wherever He places us. We come together on Sundays to worship and fellowship corporately. But we know that church isn't just about Sunday. It's about a lifelong, day-to-day following of Christ with other believers. We invite you to join us, just as you are. If you'd like to support our ministry, visit vineyardboise.org and click the Give Online button.
This morning you can see things are a little bit different. We have a tap dance floor over here, and you're not going to see me tapping, although I don't know, these boots might work. But and we've got a potter's wheel, and what we have is actually a carryover from the Reflect Creative Conference. Two of our artists have stayed in order to facilitate this morning. These are two friends who are honestly in their own craft are master artists. We've got, first of all, you're going to be seeing and hearing from Andrew Nemmer. Andrew is going to be doing some tap dance this morning. Andrew's a professional tap dancer from New York, and I think this is his third or fourth conference to come out and be a part of this. And more than just a presenter, he's become a friend. And so he's going to be sharing the message while he taps, which seems like an incredible gift. And so Andrew's going to be sharing with us. He's actually tapping on a board that our own Amanda Lynn has been painting, or she's been chalking stuff out throughout the weekend. In fact, here's a picture of one of the sessions this weekend. And each weekend she chalks some stuff out, and then he comes and taps on it, and the picture actually morphs and changes as he's tapping because it's chalk. So it's pretty fun. Today's the culmination of that, and the theme of this final board is resurrection, I believe. So Andrew's going to be tapping first, and then Dave Blakesley's going to come. Dave Blakesley is a master potter, and many of you have experienced Dave's ministry over the years. He is a friend who has actually spoken into us. Really, as a church, as part of the Vineyard movement, Dave is a vineyard pastor from Colorado, and he is just a wonderful friend. So Dave and Lisa, his wife, they have some of their pottery for sale today out in Heritage Hall. That is actually, Dave's retired from vocational ministry in a church now, so this is their income source is to go around the country and to do things like this, and then to sell what they have. So you can pick up an original Blakesley today in Heritage Hall. For now, would you welcome Andrew Nemmer?
I invite you to close your eyes. So I'm about 3 years old. You can open up your eyes. And my folks sit me around our dining room table and they say, Andrew, you're an only child. And I look around and there's nobody else there. And I say, yes, I am. And they say, what do you think about having a sibling? And I say, can I have an older brother? And my mom laughs and she says, I don't think we can do that. And I say, okay, can I have a younger brother? And she says, I don't think we can guarantee that. And I say, well, then I'm okay. I don't know how much pull I had in my family and in my parents' choices, but I'm still an only child. Only children have like this special club that they're in. Throughout my life, I was always searching for a family of brothers and sisters. I wanted somebody to cut the wind for me. In racing, the person who's in front of the line cuts the wind. Everybody else drafts behind. And at the end of the race, whoever's in the top three, they try and race for the first shot. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool? I could have somebody to cut the wind for me. I could have somebody to trip, and I'd say, oh, watch out for that. I go around. I'd help him up afterward, but at least I wouldn't have to deal with the tripping. I'm a tap dancer. There aren't a lot of us. And it's an oral tradition, which means there's nothing about this craft work that's written down. You have to look to other people to figure out how to do this thing. But then there comes a time where for every dancer inside of them, something says, not like that person, not like that person, not like that person. And then you have to say, well, then like who? Because if there's nobody to compare yourself to, who do you follow? I was invited to speak here this Sunday morning, something like 4 months ago. I didn't know that this is what I was going to be talking about until 2 minutes ago. So this is for us. After Jesus Christ reinstituted Peter, told him what to do, said, "Feed my sheep," Peter turned around, and as he was walking with Christ, he saw somebody else. And he asked Jesus, "What about that guy?" And Christ said, "What is that to you? Even if I will that he would live until I return, you follow me." Some people that I know would love nothing less than to live forever. It's their life goal, to avoid death completely. And Jesus told Peter, even if this guy gets that, that's nothing to you. You follow me. We have a faith that's really, really special. We get both things. We get a person to follow, and we get a family. Most people get one or the other. You either go follow, and that's it, or you get a family. And then there's all sorts of comparison. We have to do things the same way, and we get both. I get excited with the vantage point that I get to see sitting up here. Because each one of us has a voice that's given. And each one of us needs to hear each other's voice that's given. Because that's the only way that we're going to see all of God. Or at least as much as we're going to get to on this side. Come on. Come on.
Who's been dying to dance beside you.
See why we love Andrew? That was awesome. As Dave's getting stuff in place, I'll just let you know I completely forgot to receive the morning offering. It's classic. I was just kind of excited about what was going on here. So I don't want to take any time away from Dave. So we're not going to pass the bucket through the room, but if you would just help us by, there's little boxes in between the double doors on each side of the room. If you could just utilize those today for your offering or go online to give, that would be really helpful. Dave Blakesley.
God, we just saw like two miracles this morning. Number one, a pastor that forgets the offering. And number two, we watch, and you're going to see it with me as well. Andrew was able to do his artwork at the same time he's talking. Guys can't do that. I'm going to be making a vessel here in front of you, and I'm going to be talking too. So, let's have fun. Let's have fun this morning. So good to be back here again. Historically, God has kind of given me a word for the church each time I've come. And I think it was about a week ago, I was working in my studio, and the Lord just kind of nudged me. I have a lot of time with God in my studio. It's just a wonderful experience, kind of solo out there. And he just said, Dave, so many of the believers think that we need to bring people who are not yet believers to Christ. He said, I want people to bring me, Jesus, to them. And that's what we're going to dialogue about this morning. This is a brand new message for me, so I got to kind of work with it a little bit. I travel around the country these days, sometimes with Lisa, sometimes alone, solo. And I love speaking at the churches. I really do. I love being here. I love the body of Christ. During the week, sometimes I've learned, it sort of just happened naturally, but I learned that I could go to soup kitchens, I could go to houses that shelter battered women, I could go to celebrate recoveries, I could go to other areas of grace for those who are struggling with addictions and prisons and stuff like that, on and on and on. And let me tell you, when you go out, and you reach out to people that are struggling in life and you give them some fresh hope from Christ, Jesus shows up. He does. So I love both sides of it, but I don't want to miss the middle at all. And that's partly what I want to talk about this morning is, how does Jesus come to us? How do we bring Jesus to others? And, it depends a little bit on personalities. And while I'm speaking about personalities, I know that there's some of you in this room that are kind of going, oh my gosh, I came here this morning and it's all artsy-fartsy people, And, But for those of you who are struggling with us this morning, I need you to understand that we've been made in God's image. And the first 5 words in the Bible are, test, test, test. In the beginning, God created. And since we are made in His image, every one of us in this room, you are a creative person. Every one of us. So, how are we going to bring Jesus to people? We need to look at and understand the kind of person that we're hanging out with and loving on and having conversation with. And if they're highly intellectual kind of people, highly academic, then we might suggest a book. We might bring something that's written down that they could consider and discuss and ask questions about. And we could bring Jesus that way. Or maybe we're going to bring Jesus in relationship, that we have dinners together, that we share work together, that we, it may even be like in the Jesus movement days, communal living. I know that's a bit hippie-esque, but, been there, done that. It's good. So for relational people, that's good stuff. And then more in terms of having encounters with Christ, I think serving people. Bringing a special gift to someone that they just had no expectation for whatsoever. And in that, they're going like, well, why are you doing this? And just like, well, I just like giving stuff to people. And part of it is because Jesus gave stuff to people. And we want to follow Him and be like Him. And then it opens up discussions, and as well as living with one another. You know what I'm saying? We start to share with each other. We start to struggle with each other. But in the process of all that, we get to start revealing Christ to others and bringing him in to this relationship. It's always about bringing Jesus in to engage. And then there's the supernatural gifting. I mean, that's a wow. You know, when you can come up to a person, God's given you a word for them, and you share it to them, and they're bawling, or they're just like, oh my gosh, how did you know? I mean, that's like secret in my heart. Well, it's because God knows, and he loves you. And there's this guy, it was a son of God named Jesus, and he loves you. Or maybe you even have the opportunity to pray for someone, and God heals them. We got to watch a person who's been blind since birth. The optical areas had been damaged in the birthing process. And I got to speak that Sunday. I mean, the Lord just said, talk about Barnabas. And is it Barnabas? Anyway, some guy who's sitting on the side of the road, and he's been blind since birth. And he comes up to Jesus, and because he's crying out, Jesus, Jesus. And some people lift him up and bring him to Jesus. And Jesus looks at him and he says, what do you want? Can you imagine his disciples going, duh, Jesus, he's blind. But you see, it was important for Jesus to ask. And this guy goes, I want to see. And Jesus heals him. Well, later in that service, we had time for a ministry, and this one young man comes up with his mom, and I didn't get to see it. It was another group around him, and he'd never seen anything all of his life, and he was about 30 years old. And all of a sudden, he began to see light and dark. And then he started to see color, but he didn't know what the names of the colors are. And not only did he get touched by Jesus, but other people around him got touched by Jesus. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but oh my goodness, when it does, that's Jesus coming to us. Not us dragging somebody to Jesus. And we feel his love, and we feel his wisdom, and we feel his power, and we fall in love with him. I mean, who does not love Jesus? You want to evangelize? Let me tell you, don't talk about church. Because most people are going, ugh. Which is sad, because church is good. But you start talking about Jesus, and they're like, oh, I love Jesus. I think Jesus is way cool. So talk about Jesus. Bring Jesus to them. What I'm doing right here is beginning to center this clay. And it takes a while, so it gives me a chance to kind of ramble with you a little bit. It's the clay surrendering to my hands. And if we're going to bring Jesus to people, we got to surrender to Jesus, because he knows the time and the place and the person. And we're going to have to surrender our own desires and our own timetable. And we got to be open in public places. I've done some of my best witnessing in grocery stores and so on. I had so much fun the other day. I was waiting for a prescription at a pharmacy, and there's all of these people standing in line waiting, and they're grumbling and grumbling and grumbling. The poor people on the other side of the counter, the pharmacists there, they're like working as fast as they can. And, I'm a pastor in a small town, so I know 3/4 of the people who are grumbling. So I just started telling jokes, and messing with them and bringing Jesus to them. And I get to the counter, and I get my prescription, and the pharmacist looks at me, and she says, it's on the house. We got to bring Jesus to the public places. We got to bring Jesus to where we work. We got to go bring Jesus to our schools. We just so love him. So this clay is surrendering to my hands, and I need to bring it to a place of stillness. And sometimes if we're going to listen to God and be ready to bring Jesus to them, we got to know the time and the place. We got to surrender our lives in that sense. Get centered by him, by his hands. We live in a world these days where there's so much confusion and so many little things calling out our names that we put in our pockets and so on. You know what I'm talking about. But can we hear Jesus? And some of us argue with Jesus. None of you do, I know that, but I do. You know, I mean, the other day I was going through some tough stuff, and Lisa and I have a home right on a river side, and it's beautiful, and trees and everything, and I got a couple chairs down there, and so I went down early in the morning, and I met with Jesus, and he just talked with me and loved on me and kind of put me to peace about some stuff and some instruction, and so that was great. So the next day I decided, hey, let's do this again. So, I go down to be, encounter and invite Jesus into the situation, and I'm going to go to the same chair because I like that chair and I like being by the river, and I got a plan for God. And probably none of you ever have a plan for God, but I had a plan for God. And I'm walking towards the river, and I hear this quiet inner voice going, Dave, come be with me. And I get closer to the chair, and he says, come be with me. And I know he doesn't want me by the river. He wants to take me somewhere else. And I like the river. And so I move. It's a cold morning, and I move my chair over to a spot where the sun is shining, and I set it there, and it's got a circular base on the bottom, and I set it down, and I didn't look to notice that the ground tilted backward at that point. And so I plunked down the chair with my Bible and everything, and wham! The whole thing flips backward, bam, on my head and back. And I'm like, all right, Jesus, I give. And he took me to a wonderful spot and then talked. We got to be obedient. We got to be centered by him. He's got strong hands and a quiet voice. The next stage that's going to happen here is to open up this clay. We got to be open to Jesus. I love Peter, such a good Jewish man, and you're not supposed to associate with Gentiles, etc. at that time. And Jesus has already been to the cross, and Peter has received the Holy Spirit. And what I'm doing is I'm going to make a hole in the very center of the clay. And to me, that kind of symbolizes being open to Christ, whatever he wants. Open to the lead of the Holy Spirit, open to the words in the Bible. And Peter, of course, has this vision, this dream, and I won't go into great detail, but it ends up that he is told that he's going to go and visit. Well, I know what it was. No, the dream was that this blanket was coming down from the sky and had all these forbidden foods on it that good Jews would not eat at that time, and in that whole process, I didn't plan on teaching on this, so I'm not doing it probably correctly, but you'll get the gist. And Peter says, "No, I can't eat that stuff. That's forbidden." And what God was saying to him is, "You're going to go mingle with non-Jews. In fact, you're going to share me with non-Jews." And sure enough, a Roman centurion, a wealthy man, had sent servants out to get Peter and knew exactly, by the Spirit of God, knew exactly where Peter would be, and brings Peter to this guy's home, and the man, his wife, his children, and all the servants of the house came to Christ. So sometimes we feel like this is not what God would normally do. I am a storyteller, so one more quick story in that line. About 6 months ago, I got invited to, I'm going to start making this vessel grow. I got invited to do the Potter's Talk by a good friend of mine for a mentor-mentee program. And I said, I always say yes when I don't think about it, you know? And like it's 6 months away, it's a long time. I'll probably, you know, be in Florida by then or something. And so it gets really close to the date. I'm like, oh my gosh, about 75% of the people that are going to be there don't know anything about Jesus. In fact, maybe even repelled. And I'm like, oh God, what do you want me to do? Because normally when I do this Potter's Talk, I'm talking about you. And I'm kind of looking for wisdom, and all of a sudden God says, you don't have to talk about me. And I'm like, really? And it was silence. So I've learned that when God goes silent, it means obey me. So I was like, okay. So I go in, I kind of change the whole message so it's much more secular. And these little guys, they're just like you guys right here. But it's about 5 boys. Hey there, how you doing? Good, I'm glad you're here. 5 little boys kind of come up to the stage. It's a much lower stage than this, and pretty soon they can't stand it, and they climb up on the stage, and they're about like here to me. And one of the boys raises his hands, and I call him, I recognize him, and he looks at me, he says, you should be a preacher. And I said, well, actually I am. And he said, oh, I wish you were my preacher. Oh. And then he stands up and he looks out at the crowd and he says, last year I gave my life to Jesus and I love Jesus and I'm never turning back. And I go, okay, God, that's why you didn't want it, because he's got it. So that boy brought Jesus in the midst of the crowd. All I did was listen and obey. So what I'm doing right now is I'm squeezing the clay between my 2 hands, and it makes the vessel grow. And I think about this. This is a partnership. It's a partnership between 2 hands. Jesus on the inside of us and our willingness to say, yes, Lord. And we say, yes, Lord, and amazing things begin to happen. Actually, to say no, Lord, is an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense, because if we say no, then he's not Lord. But let's partner with Jesus as we bring him to others. Years and years ago, when I first accepted Christ, I was kind of a late bloomer on this, but when I accepted Jesus into my life, I wanted to do something. I wanted to give him away to other people and serve other people. I've always kind of had a heart for people who are physically or financially challenged. So I went to a little Catholic group of convent kind of place, and I got a volunteer job of delivering food to people who were either had lost their job or couldn't work for whatever reasons, and they were impoverished. And I saw more miracles there than any other place, even as a pastor in a church. And one day, I think it was probably my favorite miracle that Jesus did. There was this older woman named Lucille, and Lucille lived in a trailer with 14 poodles. You get the picture. And Lucille was quite overweight, but she really liked sweets. So I made sure that the day-old breads that I was bringing around, I also picked up some donut packages for her. She liked me. And she did have a velvet picture on the wall of the Last Supper, but she was definitely not a believer. And she swore like a sailor, or whatever that means. And, you know, every third word was a swear word. And one day, but I really liked her, and she liked me. And one day I show up, and she's crying. I said, what's wrong, Lucille? And she says, the doctor tells me that he's got to cut off my feet because of my circulation is so bad. And then she pulls up her pant legs and shows me, and her ankle areas were like black, purple black. I'm like, oh. She said, would you pray for me? And I said, sure. So I get down on my hands and feet, and I slip off her slippers, and I lay hands on her feet. And I mean, these are gnarly old feet, you know. Feet are kind of yiggly anyway, but, and I'm getting to that age now too. I put my hands on her feet and I said, now, Lucille, sometimes when I'm praying for people, a different language starts coming out. And she goes, you mean talking in tongues? I've seen that on TV. You just go ahead and pray. Now, I couldn't say the words that she said in between some of those words, but. So I did. I started praying for her. I laid hands on her feet, and all of a sudden she starts swearing, and in the midst of it, she says, Jesus. And I look up at her and says, what? She goes, look at my feet. And I looked down at her feet, and they were pink. And she came to Christ that week. So sometimes we're going to bring miracles with Jesus' name on them. Someday I'll get to see Lucille again. And I'll just tell her how many times I talked about her. Anyway, like I said earlier, there's something about partnering with Jesus and Him sending. You ever notice that Jesus always was hanging out with the poor and the broken and the prostitutes? He was always raising up the people that had been pressed down, and always challenging the people who were in high royalty positions and challenging them to be humble. He loved to hang out with the broken. I would encourage you to do that. Find those that are either at work or school or neighborhood who are being ignored and challenged. And listen to them and care about them. Love on them. And at some point, they'll kind of go, why do you do this? Then you get to talk about Jesus, what He's done in your life. Like I said, everybody loves Jesus. And it will stretch you. You know, I first started doing that ministry in this little tiny town. I was real bashful as a Christian. I was fairly new at it. And Lisa and my wife and I went on vacation, and I asked a woman that the Lord had pointed out to me to take over the ministry for a while. Well, we were gone for a little over a month, and I came back, and her name was Sandra, and I went to the first house, and the woman had met me at the door, and I had known her for a while. She was looking over my shoulder, you know. And I said, what are you looking for? And she said, well, where's Sandra? And I said, oh, well, you know, she was just kind of temporary and so on, but I'm back now. And she goes, well, the first week after you were gone, my husband came down with pneumonia, and she prayed for him. And he got well within a couple days. Do you pray for people? And up to then, like, if I said, God bless you, it was big. It was a stretcher for me. I said, sure. And that day changed my life. God's going to stretch you. But you'll feel good while He's stretching you, and you'll like the new shape that you're becoming. And it's a little scary because you could collapse. You're being expanded, though, and you're bringing the love of Jesus to other people. Like Andrew, a lot of this stuff I didn't know I was going to be talking about, but I do have a clock here in case any of you are nervous. I've sat out there with you, I know. You know, the next stage has got to happen here. I mean, what's your name right there? Yeah, you. Alexander. Okay, Alexander. I'm going to use your name with your permission. Okay? I'm going to relate you with this pot here. So this pot named Alexander is saying to me, Potter, I'm ready. Look at me. I got shape. I got form. I'm ready to go out and be filled with flowers at somebody's house. And I'm like, Andrew, you're not ready. What do you mean I'm not ready yet? Buddy, as soon as you go to somebody's house and the person fills you up with water so they can put flowers in you, you're going to turn into a mud puddle. You're just not strong yet. Jesus lets us go, become like this, to become strong in our faith. Sooner or later, we're going to go through fire. Because after this pot dries out and I put glaze on it, I take it outside with all the rest of the pots and put it in my kiln, which is a great big kiln, and brick up the door. And, you know, first of all, they're like, we were in the studio before, now we're out here, and what the heck is this? And things are changing. None of us like change except a wet baby. And so they're a little nervous with that, and then I brick up the door and they can't see me anymore. Like, where's the potter? And then I light my burners and flame begins to go into the kiln, and it starts getting hot, and then it gets hotter and hotter, and I fire my kiln to 2,350 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's hot. And if it goes to 2,400 degrees, just a little bit hotter, my clay begins to melt and the glaze begins to run off the sides of the pots and they're ruined. People, beloved, we're going to go through fires in our lives. It may be in our marriage, it may be in our health, it may be in our finances or our job or whatever, but there'll be things where we're going, God, where are you in this? I can't see you. And Satan loves those moments, and he'll say things like, where's your God now? He's off in the Bahamas, isn't he? He's forgotten all about you. And that's, of course, Jesus said that he's a liar, and he is. Because the truth of the matter is, as a potter, I am all around that kiln. I'm walking around it, I'm checking. I don't go to bed that night. I'm adjusting the flame and the color of the flame and what temperature it's at, and the wind comes up, so I've got to make some adjustments. Because I want my pots to succeed. And when you go through fires, when I go through a fire, God wants to bring me through it, and you as well. And what does a fire do for this pot? It makes it strong. And our faith in God becomes stronger when we're crying out to him. We got to go through hard stuff in order to be able to bring Jesus to people who are going through hard stuff. And I don't preach a lot in those moments. I just say, can I pray with you? Can I help you in any way? And if they say yes or whatever, at some point I can just talk a little bit about Jesus. If they're open to more and more. We bring Jesus to the troubled. For a while, my hospital in my town had brought in, myself included, signed up a number of the pastors. And we'd have a little emergency thing that we put on our belt. And for that week, every time that we had an emergency at the hospital, we'd get buzzed in. I'd sit with families whose child had gotten so hurt in an auto accident or various other crises. And I usually ask, can I pray with you? And it's interesting, when people are in really dangerous situations, suddenly they're really open to prayer a lot of times. Rarely was I ever refused. So we got to go through fire. And it hurts, it's scary, it's frightening, but then the time comes when I open up the kiln and I bring out all these pots, and they're beautiful, and I examine each one. And this room here, this is the studio of God. And this room was not set up to be a place where you're going to camp and live. We're sent to go out. When I make my pots, I don't keep them in the studio. I send them out to serve other people. Kind of going back to the whole idea of how much Jesus went to the broken and the poor. And I love at the end of the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus, it's the parable of the sheep and the goats, and he lines these folks up, and this group over here are the goats, which are kind of despised by the Jews or something at that time. They weren't esteemed very highly. And then there's the sheep over here. And he makes it clear of a division, and basically he says to them, I was hungry, and you, sheep, fed me. I was hungry, and you did not feed me. I was in prison, and you came and visited me. I was in prison, and you ignored me. I needed a place, a shelter, and you invited me into your home. And you locked the door. And then they said, well, when did we do this? And when did we not do this? And Jesus said, whenever you did it to those around you, whenever you helped them, you helped me. Because I'm in these people. And I love them whether they know me or not. So when you gave, when you sheltered, when you clothed them, you did that for me as well. You clothed me, you fed me, you sheltered me. And when you did not, you abandoned me. Sometimes we get invited to deal with people who are really in a mess. And they may look in the public like everything is cool and everything is great. But the reality is that if we get to know them a little bit, they're really broken. And Jesus told this wonderful story, and I'm going to close out with this. I think it's his best story. He said there was a father who had two sons, and the youngest son was pretty ambitious, and he's a teenager, and he came to the father and he says, I want my half of the inheritance in cash, which is a pretty incredible request. And the father actually went and did it, gave him his part of his inheritance in cash. And the young man took it far away. He went independent. Many of us have lived that kind of life. He went independent and he had all this money, but I'll tell you, you got a lot of money, you get a lot of friends quick. And I don't know exactly how it all got spent, but it all got spent. And pretty soon he's penniless. And a famine comes on the land, Jesus said. And it's hard for him to find a job. And the only job he could find was to feed pigs for this pig farmer, which is not exactly what good Jewish boys want to do. And the farmer wouldn't even allow him to eat the pig food. And he got hungrier and hungrier and more desperate. He suddenly came up with a plan. And the plan was, my father, I'm no longer worthy to be his son. I can't go home and live in his home, but my father takes good care of his servants. So I'll go back and work for him, and he'll clothe me and give me shelter and food, much better than what I have here. So with that thought in mind, he begins to walk home. And I think as he's walking home, this is just my own imagination, I think he's thinking about meeting his father and saying, oh, Father, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, but if you just let me work for you, I want to do that. So one day, the father is, I think, sitting on the front porch, but he's visible to all the meadows around him, and he sees this figure way off in the distance. And he looks again. And there's something familiar about the way this distant figure is walking. And then he realizes, it's my son. It's my son. And he hikes up his robes and he begins running towards this figure, this son of his. And the son's going, oh. And he's rehearsing again in his mind, I'm no longer worthy to be your son. And then the father gets really, really close to him. And the son says, Father, I'm no longer worthy to be your son. But the father grabs him in his arms. And he says, my son, to his servant, my son was dead and now he's alive. My son was lost and now he's found. So go kill the best steer in the house and invite all of Boise tonight to dinner. And go get the robe. Go get the robe and we'll put it on him, the robe with the family pattern woven in the back. Go get the ring that has my seal on it. And every time he presses it into the wax, he's got my authority on it. And last but not least, go get sandals for his feet. Now, a lot of us are unaware, why was that significant? Well, in those days, servants, workers, slaves were not allowed to wear footwear. They went barefoot. And when he said, bring the sandals, he was saying to his son, you can't work for my food. You can't work for my housing. You can't work for my clothing for you or my love for you. That's how he is with us. When we mess up and we're ashamed, when we're broken, and some of you in this room I know are, it's time to come on home. It's time to come on home and let the Father love on you. The Father that loved his Son so much loves us in the same way. And I know in a crowd this size, some of you need to come on home. Don't wait too long. Please don't say the lie, I am no longer worthy to belong to you. Because he doesn't care anything about your worthiness. You're his creation. And he has a plan for you and a purpose. And he wants you home. So today, before you leave this place, if you need to come home, find someone to just say, hey, would you pray for me? Would you put your arm around my shoulder? Whatever it is you need. Maybe it's money. Don't leave without having come home. Please. Thank you very much.